Okay, it is the 6th of March 2012 and I was going for a walk this morning and I discovered this massive hole in the middle of the road. It's a little bit scary. I don't know what caused it. I don't know how long it's been here. I'm assuming it crept up overnight from the rain we've been having the last few days. And it's a little bit scary. I don't know how deep it is because I haven't gotten that close to check and I don't want to. But yeah. Yeah, so that is a hole in the road.
G'day and welcome to a new Blender Guru tutorial, and of course the video that you just watched is not real. It is in fact the topic of this tutorial, which is all about camera tracking. So it's a new feature in Blender which allows you to take real video footage that is filmed with a real camera and then to add 3D elements to it. So it's very, very exciting. It opens up a whole world of opportunities, literally, that you can now do in Blender. You can have robots fighting on a street. You can do some UFO hoax videos. You can do a sinkhole hoax video. In fact, the reason I created that little video there at the start was to see if I could possibly fool the YouTube community into thinking that the sinkhole was real. So I posted up the video about 12 hours ago, and I'll be honest, most people didn't fall for it. The majority of my subscribers on YouTube are, of course, you guys, Blender users, which is like trying to do a magic trick to a bunch of magicians. Very, very hard to fool. You guys are very good. You spotted it and called me out on it, but I'm going to leave the video up anyway, and maybe some other people will find it and see what they make of it. But anyway, it's a bit of fun. You can have a lot of fun with this new feature, and that's what we're going to be learning about in this tutorial. So if you don't know anything about camera tracking, you don't know what it is, where to start, you don't know what all the fuss is about, then this video is for you. So I'm just going to give you an overview of it and show you briefly how you can start tracking, basically. So this is the finished result that you can see right here. This is what it looks like in Blender. So what I've got is the video, which has then been tracked, and then you can see that my actual camera here in Blender is moving to the exact movement of the real camera, the one that I was holding and filming. So that is essentially how this this camera tracker works. So I'll just show you now what the camera tracker looks like. This is it right here. So the way the camera tracker works is it takes individual points of a video of high contrast. For example, these little white dots that are here on the road, which were put there deliberately by myself, by the way. It takes those little points and it is able to track them. So you can see up here in the top right window, you've got this little window here which is tracking this one little white dot on the floor, and all of these points are doing that. So that is how it's able to track it. So essentially what we're going to be doing in this video is taking a short segment of this video, showing you how to set up these little points, and then export that over to a real camera here in Blender, and then start adding in this hole right here. So without further ado, let's go ahead now and open up a new scene in Blender. Okay, so let me just turn on the screencast tool so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so in order to access the camera tracker, what we need to do is change it from 3D view down here to movie clip editor, which is a new feature you've probably never seen before. So go ahead and click on that, and then we're going to go ahead and click on open, and we're going to load in our video. So the video I'm going to be using is available. If you're watching this on Blender Guru, you can go ahead and download it right there. And it is a short segment of the full video that you just watched. Okay, so it's like this. Okay, so the first thing you'll probably notice when you're looking at this video is in this movie clip editor here, is that along the bottom here you've got this blue bar, okay, and then as you scroll through it, or if you play it, if you hit Alt-A, you'll notice that some of the frames are a light blue color and then the others are a dark blue color. Now what that is essentially cached frames in Blender, okay? So if you're not sure what caching is, it essentially means it's kind of temporarily saved those frames so it's easier to view later on. Now you'll notice that only about 50 frames are able to be cached at a time, okay? Now the reason for that is that by default, Blender's cache amount is very small. So you can change that by going to File, User Preferences, then clicking on System, and then down here underneath Sequence, you can change the memory cache limit. Now, if you want, you can go ahead and turn that all the way up to maximum, which would be your amount of RAM. So I've got 16 gigabytes, so that's why it's at 16,000. Yours might be different. You can go ahead and turn that all the way up to maximum. Now, because I'm recording a video, it can kind of stutter if I use the maximum RAM. So I'm going to go ahead and use half, but you can go ahead and use all that you've got. That's fine. So once you've gone and changed that, you'll notice that it is now able to cache in essentially all of your video footage. Now when it gets to around about frame 210, you'll notice that it stops. Now the reason for that is that is how long the actual video is. So if we scroll back here, you can see where the video stops. It is at exactly frame 210. So in the timeline, I'm going to set my end frame to be 210. So you can now play through the entire thing, and it's now caching all of the frames, and we're good to go. Okay, so in this movie clip editor where we're going to be doing our camera tracking, you've got a number of settings that you have probably never seen before, and it can probably look a little bit daunting when you first come here. You've got, track, you've got markers, you've got camera solve, you've got all this stuff, and it looks very confusing when you first come to it, but once you get started and you actually get into it, it's actually very easy. And I know I always say that, but it actually is. It's actually quite fun as well. I've kind of enjoying tracking things now. When you've got good footage that actually tracks well, it can be fun. If you've got bad footage, it can be bad. We'll get to what the difference between that is later, but to give you an overview of what everything here does. Okay, so essentially the way this works is you drop in a tracking marker. So you can go up here in the top left hand corner and you can click on Add Marker Move. And what this is going to do is it's going to add in one little marker, and basically the aim of this is to drop it in a place where there is high contrast areas. So I've got these little white markers which I put on the road deliberately so that it's easier to track. That's something that I learned from many failed video attempts. So I put them there. Anyway, so once you've got one of those markers there, you can then go ahead and track it by clicking on this little arrow there, and it's going to try and track it through the video, just like that. And actually, it's really cool because these markers, you can actually select them, you can move them using all the keyboard shortcuts that you're used to in Blender. So if you want to move that marker, you then just go ahead and hit G and you can move it. It's normally not connected like that. If it's a new marker, then yeah, you just go, you press G and you can move that marker to be somewhere else. If you want to scale it, you just hit S. So these are, shortcuts that you're already used to. If you want to delete it, you go ahead and you hit X and you delete it. So it's actually really well done. The way it's designed, you already know all the keyboard shortcuts, and it's very cool. Anyway, okay, so getting back to tracking, okay? Now there are two ways of tracking a video shot using this camera tracker. There is the lazy method and there is the manual method. Now, I highly recommend that you use the manual method, and I'm sure that if you try to use the lazy method, you're going to realize why. Essentially, the lazy method, you hit detect features, okay? So up here, you click on detect, and it's going to try and automatically detect where the high contrast areas of your scene are, and it's going to try and track it based on that. Now, if we do that, let's just give it a quick test right now. You'll notice that it does a very, very poor job. It only gets about halfway through the scene before it's lost all of the tracking markers, and it utterly failed. And you can tell, looking at it, it hasn't picked some high contrast areas that are actually good. Look at it, it's like picked some dark area here in the bottom left-hand corner where there's almost no contrast at all, and it's left all these white dots here relatively untouched. So it doesn't do a very good job. I'm sure that in the future, that feature, the detect features button, it will do a better job, but currently it does a poor job. And I actually recommend that you, when you're at least first starting out in particular, that you get into the habit of adding your own markers anyway, because it's better for learning and it's going to help you in the future when you film an actual shot to understand what makes a good shot trackable and what makes a bad shot untrackable. So this is all part of the learning process, and it's also quite fun. Anyway, so we're going to do the manual method. So make sure you are on frame 1. Okay, so you do that by hitting shift left arrow. If you want to go to the end frame, you hit shift right arrow. Little keyboard shortcut there for you. Anyway, to add a tracking marker, what you do is, looking at your video footage here, you hold down control and then you left click. That's a shortcut, or you can go up here and click on add marker and move. It does the exact same thing. One is a lot quicker than the other. So I highly recommend just clicking like this. Okay, so once you've added a tracking marker, just go ahead and click on one of those little white dots there. You can then track it to see if that is a successful tracking point. So over here where we've got the track, you've got these little buttons here. So we need to go ahead and click on the right arrow button, and that will start tracking. So let's do that. You click on it and you'll notice that it gets up to frame 73 and then it stops. Now, why is that, do you think? Well, when it stops, it means that it has lost the tracking marker, and a telltale sign is right up here where it's got the little tracking window. It suddenly goes a pale red color to let you know, you've failed. Try again. Now, it can it can lose a tracking marker for a number of different reasons. If you go here in the top left-hand corner, you've got tracking settings. Now, here is where you can start doing some manual adjustments. You have got the pattern size and you've got the search size. You've also got the tracker correlation. You've also got the match. There's a whole number of these features. So let me just go through what they are briefly. Okay, so the pattern size is the size of the area which Blender is going to try to match frame by frame. Okay, so if I, let's say, set this to be 50, and then I click here, you can see that it has now, in this little top right hand corner, it's trying to track that entire area. So it's got all that black and then it's got that white little dot in the center there. Now that's good, it's going to give you probably quite a secure track, but it is going to be a lot slower than if you use a smaller size. If you want a fast track, then I highly recommend you use as small a pattern size as you physically can. So you can actually get away in this scene with a pattern size of just 10. If it's done properly. So if you just set it to be, let's say, on the corner of that little white marker there, and that and where the road meets, you're essentially trying to match it up with a high contrast area. So just like that. Now the search size is the area in which Blender is going to search for this location. So if you've got really jumpy, choppy footage going everywhere, then you're going to want a larger search size. So if I just turn on search in this marker display here, turn on search, you can actually see the area that it's going to look for that. Now that search size is actually quite big. I think we can get away with, I think 31 is enough. Also one other thing. The functions over here on the left-hand side, these tracking settings, they will not change markers that are already in the scene. This is only for new tracking markers that you're going to place. So you can see that now I've changed that. If I click over here, it's now changed it to the updated these settings over here that we've just changed. But this one remains the same. If you want to change a marker that's already placed, you want to change the settings, you go to the right hand side underneath these tracking settings here, and then you can change you can change some functions there if you want to. So you change these settings over here, then you start to place the markers. That's generally the gist of what you do. Now, so you've got the pattern size, that's the size of that area. You've got the search size, which is the size that it's going to be scanning in. Now you've got the tracker. Now there are two types here, SAD, KLT, and you've got hybrid. To be honest, I don't know the ins and outs of what that does, okay? This is very new, this feature in Blender. There's not there's hardly any documentation on it. And I heard somewhere that SAD works better than KLT in some circumstances. You don't really need to worry about that. Just leave it on hybrid. That'll be fine for, I don't know, most of what you do. I'm guessing I haven't had to change it, so I'm assuming you probably won't either, or at least when you're first starting out. Now the correlation, that is essentially the threshold that it's going to try to track by. Okay, so the lower you set that to, the more leeway it's going to give. So if you set this to a very low amount, like let's say 0, it's going to track it really loosely, as in like if you've got really shaky, jumbly footage and it can't find anything to track, you might need to lower that correlation size, and it's going to allow more leeway, so more changing of this tracking marker, and it's going to work a little bit better. However, the higher you set that to, the more secure and rigid the tracking markers are going to be. So I actually recommend leaving it at 0.75. That's actually pretty good because that's going to give you a more solid looking track, at least in my experience. You're going to get less slight moving of your objects, and it's just going to look a little bit more secure. So leave that at that. The frames limit, this number of frames are tracked. I haven't changed that. That's fine. The margin, that is the sort of the boundary box for the edge of the video frame. So if you've got a marker that's kind of reaching the edge and then it's sliding, as I think can sometimes happen, I haven't had it too much, then you set the margin and it's going to cut it out before it reaches the edge. So if you set that to 5, it's going to cut out the tracking marker 5 pixels before it reaches the edge. So just set it as 5, that's fine, it doesn't really matter that much. Now down here where it's got match, you've got 2 options. You've got previous frame and you've got keyframe. Now from my experience, I've found previous frame actually works better than keyframe. Now I don't actually know what those do. I don't know the ins and outs of it because there's no documentation on it. And just from my own experience, I've found keyframe tends to lose the markers a lot easier than previous frame. Previous frame tends to match it to what the previous frame was. Anyway, I found it works to be a lot better. Go ahead, experiment with whatever scene you've got going, and it might, you might find things are different. But anyway, I'm leaving mine set to previous frame. Okay, that's what we're going to use for this tutorial. And the rest of it, you don't need to worry about yet. The solve, that's after you finish tracking. Same with cleanup. Same with clip. All you need to worry about is this part right here. Okay, so once we've set the settings, we can now go ahead and start tracking some points. So let's go ahead and click on, let's say this dot right here. You want to center it in the white area as much as possible. So looking up here in the right hand corner, you got that little box there. Let's try and get it in the white marker as best as possible. These white markers, by the way, I placed, they're just a piece of white paper stuck to a coin. So I threw them out there because I previously tried to use it with little tiny stickers which I stuck on the road, and I came back to my computer and I tried to track it and it didn't work because the stickers were too tiny. So I got some coins, put some paper on it, went out there, shot it again, and it worked a lot better. So this works for this scene, of course, by having these white markers here because that's where my hole is. So the hole is going to be covering up that whole area where the markers are. So that's why I can get away with using physical markers. If you've got a marker in the shot that you don't want to be in the final thing, then you're going to have to do some fancy stuff, probably with After Effects, where you actually try and remove the marker from the scene. But that's just, getting a bit advanced. Anyway, by the way, I'm control left clicking on these points here. And then if it's not where I want it to be, like if I click here and I want to move it, I just push G. And if you hold down Shift as well, then you can make it move in smaller increments, so it's easier to find the exact position. And I'm just going to go through and I'm just clicking all of these. So that's piecing our way through it. Now you may find that when you start tracking this, some of the points are going to be fine, and then other points are going to be lost. And that's just the way it works. Some points, you can tell they're all different. Some points are going to work better than others. You may have to change some of like the pattern size or the search size for some points. But generally, if you do it well, you should be able to use most of these settings the same for everything. Some of these points, by the way, are actually cigarette butts because I only had a certain number of coins on me because I'm poor. I only had a few number of coins on me, and I wanted some more tracking markers, so I went into this little field over here and I found a cigarette butt, and I was like, oh, perfect, that's white, I can use that. And I was like, that's good. I found one cigarette butt, and then I was like, oh, there's another cigarette butt, and another one, And I noticed that like all along this field here were just cigarette butts just in the dirt, and smoking is quite big in Korea, so there's a lot of cigarette butts just everywhere I found. So that was pretty disgusting, picking up dirty cigarette butts and throwing them out onto the road. And actually the guy that lived on the left-hand side over here, he came out for a smoke to watch me, because he was utterly baffled why this white guy was out on his road filming and throwing cigarette butts around. So I'm fairly certain I confused him. And yeah. Anyway, so the whole point of this is to get some areas that are in the foreground and some areas that are in the background. So sometimes you can get it with just a few markers, sometimes you have to use more. The more markers you use and you have a mix of background, foreground, the better the overall tracking for the scene is going to be. So I'm now just going into the background here, dropping in a few markers over near these cabbages, I guess, which they're growing there. I don't know who owns these fields. They're just everywhere in the area that I'm living at the moment. And it's just, yeah, the fields are very bizarrely placed. Like there's just all these buildings everywhere, apartments, and then just mixed in between them, you've just got fields. Just wedged in between two apartment blocks, you've just got a field of cabbages, and some of them are empty, some of them are full of rubbish, and it's quite bizarre. But yeah, the the area I live in South Korea is kind of a country town. It's where my girlfriend is going to university, so I'm just doing my best to fill up some time just talking about random stuff whilst I track things. It's kind of a, I don't know, it can be fun. It's a very good learning experience tracking things by hand. It kind of gives you an idea of what a good track scene is, and trust me, after you've spent a whole day of tracking something, the next time you watch a video or you go outside and you're like walking down the street, you'll see like, you know, like a cigarette butt on the road or something, and you'll be like, oh, that's a good tracking point. Or, you know, you walk up to a door and there's like a nice corner and you go, oh, that's a good tracking point. And it's very weird. You never notice that stuff until you start tracking. And actually, I remember, I think it was about 8 years ago, I had my first experience tracking a scene for a high school short film that I was making. And I wanted to add like a security camera in the scene as it was part of the plot. And I filmed just a white wall, and I moved the camera up. You know, and in the corner there was supposed to be, you know, the camera sitting there. And I was up all night trying to get this scene tracked, because it was a white wall and there was no points that it could grab, and it eventually failed. I could not track the scene. I had to use another shot, which was worse, but it had someone's head in the way so it could track that scene or whatever. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling. I think that is enough tracking points now. That's going to be enough. The most important thing is that you get the area where, you know, the 3D element is going to be. You get that area down pat, because that is the part that needs to be the most secure. So provided you've got that, it should work fairly well. Anyway, I'm going to select all of those points there by hitting A, which is a keyboard shortcut you're probably all used to. So you hit A, that's going to select all of them, and then you go ahead and track it. If you only select one and then you track it, it's going to just track that one individual point, which is kind of useless. So select all of them and then go here where it says track, and I'm going to go ahead and click it. And you can see that that has actually tracked fairly quickly. Now the reason it's tracked fairly quickly is because we've optimized it by setting the pattern size to a small amount, the search size to a small amount. If you set these sizes here too large, you may find that it takes close to an hour to track. So that's why it's very important to get that right. But as you can see here, most of the tracking points stay in the place. These points here, by the way, this point and this point, that little point looks like a dud. That means that's a point where it's lost its tracking marker. Now you can see that up on the corner here of the screen, you've got a whole bunch of tracking markers that were lost. And that's mainly, of course, because they've gone off the edge of the screen. So that's fine. You don't need to worry about them. That's going to happen, obviously. But provided the majority of these ones in the foreground are still here, it's a successful track. So now that we've done that, we can now go ahead and move on to the next thing. So once you've successfully tracked a scene like this, now comes the part where we actually export it or get all this data here to apply to our actual camera that is actually in Blender. Okay, so let me just get a drink of water before I start talking again. Okay, so first thing that we need to do is on the right hand side, you've got something here called camera data. Now this is very, very important. This camera data will dramatically affect how successful your track is. You need to change your camera data to accurately reflect the settings of your camera. Now the reason you need to do this, of course, is because the focal length, the sensor width, size, this all affects how an actual shot or a video looks. So if you've zoomed the camera in more, then this focal length is going to be different than if it was zoomed out. And to track it, Blender needs to know that exact data. So if you don't know the focal length of your camera or the sensor width of your camera, you need to go ahead and find out what that is. So you can do that relatively easily by going to your internet. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a search. Okay, so my camera that I used was a Canon 550. Just because I know somebody's going to notice this, when I just I typed in C, then it came up with cabin porn. That's not a pornographic site, okay? That is where you find architectural images. I just want to make that clear because I know someone's going to write it in the comments that I was... Anyway. So my camera is a Canon 550D. So I'm going to type in Canon 550D specifications. Let's go ahead, type that in. And you've got a whole bunch of stuff here. I'm going to go ahead and just click on this PDF because I know that's where it is. So I'm going to click on that. And we've got the specifications for my camera that I filmed with. Now your camera might not be the Canon 550D. You will have to search and find it yourself. It's pretty annoying, and it's one of those things that's going to take you a while, and I'm assuming that in the future... oh, look at that. There is some data there. You can change that. That's brilliant. Okay, I don't know how long that's been there. Well, you've got the camera presets. That's great. You've got the Canon 550D. Cool. Anyway, what I was going to say is if your camera isn't in these... that's so weird. I did not know that was there. And this was one of the things that I was hoping it was going to be there, and I don't know how I didn't notice that. Anyway, it's right there, Canon 550D. So it's set my sensor width to be the correct one. So if you don't know what your sensor width is, you find it under where your image specifications are, image sensor type, and it's got times something millimeter. It's the first one. It's the width. So 22.3. That is the width of the sensor. Okay, so that's why I've put that in there. Now the focal length is whatever the lens is set to. Okay, now the Canon 550D has interchangeable lenses, so that's why these presets here haven't changed this value, because you need to actually know what type of lens that you used on your camera. Now, excuse me, in my case, I do know. Mine is 18 millimeters. So I'm going to go ahead and change that to 18 millimeters. Now these other settings here, you've got lens distortion. That's for more advanced users. That's barrel distortion, where the lens has actually bent the image slightly. That's if you want to get like a really, really super secure track. So if you're a really advanced user and you want to go through that, go ahead and do that. There's not really much information on what these settings here do yet if you want to start tweaking it. I have heard that the K1 is the one that you actually you want to use, and if you want to start fiddling around with that, then I think it's where is it? Grease pencil? Oh, anyway, it doesn't even matter. Lens distortion, you can fiddle with that if you want to. Provided you've got the focal length, you've got the sensor width, that's all good to go. We're then almost up to the final step where we're going to calculate the motion, but there's one more thing we need to do, and that is this part right here. You've got the keyframe A and you've got keyframe B. That's very important that you pay attention to this part, because if you don't, your scene may be screwed up. Very high chance of that, actually. So what this is it's telling Blender where there is significant parallax movement, which sounds like something from a science textbook, but really what it is you're telling Blender where there is significant movement from the camera, as in the camera's actually shifting position. So you need to find a position in your video where the camera is actually moved forward. So if you're holding the camera and you're walking forward, whether it's actually moving, that is a good point to put this keyframe A and keyframe B. So currently it's at frame 1 to 30, and as you can see from here, there isn't really all that much forward movement from those two keyframes there. So I'm going to find a part where there is significant movement. So I can see here, starting at frame 40, it steps forward, it twists to the side a little bit, and there's an extra step there as well. So from frame 40 to frame 90, I can see there is a lot more movement. Now, by the way, if you're wondering why we have to do this, my guess is really that the reason you need to do this is so that Blender actually knows sort of the depth of the scene, which points come before other points and stuff like that. So if you didn't have this, then it would be hard for Blender to kind of make up the rest of the scene. So that's why you need to put this in yourself. So I'm changing keyframe A to 40, keyframe B to 90, and that should do it correctly. Now, if you find that after you've calculated your camera motion, the camera motion's all shaky and it's completely wrong, chances are you need to change the keyframe A and keyframe B. That can dramatically change how the end camera movement actually looks. So just something to note there. Anyway, now that we've got all this set up, now we can go ahead and click that golden button right here underneath Solve where it says Camera Motion. So go ahead and click that, and you'll see up the top there it says Completing Solution, and then it says Bundling, and it waits at 99% for a little while. It can take longer depending on how many points you've got. It's finished now. Now you'll notice that down here in the bottom right hand corner it says average solve error 0.6. Now that doesn't mean that there's a fault with it, that there's some big error you need to fix. There's always going to be an average solve error. What that is telling you is how accurate your tracking is. So the higher that number is, the worse your track is, okay? So you want to try and get that number as low as possible. They say that if you can get it if it's less than 1, then that means it's a really good track. So actually this here, 0.6, that's a pretty good track. And if it's 1 to 3, that means it's a good track. And if it's more than 3, then there's going to be some issues with it, and you probably want to go back and try and fix it as best you can. So those are just some kind of values to go off. Now you can actually experiment with your focal length, because I sort of actually noticed, I thought that my lens was actually on the lowest possible function, which is 18 millimeters. But I found that actually if I set this to 19 millimeters and then I hit camera motion again, that I actually get a solve error as it comes up a second. Yeah, you can see I get a solve error of 0.59, which is actually slightly less than when it was on 18. So that can actually tell me that it was actually probably closer to 19 millimeters than 18 millimeters. So if you're not sure what your focal length is and you kind of thought, oh, maybe it's around 25, maybe 30, you can experiment with that by setting it to different ones and then trying to get that average solve error as low as possible. And then once it's as low as possible, then you'll know that that's probably what the lens was set to. So that's just some information that you can go off. Anyway, provided you have done that, we can now go ahead and switch to the 3D view mode. And here we have our nice camera sitting here waiting. And if we hit Alt-A, you'll notice that nothing happens. The camera is just sitting there. Okay, so what's happening? Well, that is because you need to go to the Object Constraints panel right here, and then we need to add a camera solver. So go ahead and click that. And now if we hit Alt-A, you'll see that the camera is moving, and you also have these lovely little points, these little empties which have been placed in the scene, and they actually signify where there is a tracking point from the video. So you can see now it looks as though it has tracked correctly. So actually if we go back, I'll just split this view here because we're going to do just a tiny little bit more work with the movie clip editor. If I click on down at the bottom here where it's got clip, you can click on set as background, and then when you look through the camera viewport, you now have the actual video that's been added to the backdrop for you. So having a look at this, you can see that those little empties are in the same spot or where they should be, basically, provided they're not sliding around like crazy, then it means that it has been successfully tracked. So well done. Yay! Round of applause. It's looking good. Okay, but there's still a little bit more work to do. Okay, so for one thing, you can notice that these empties here are kind of just randomly out in the open there. They're really, it's very awkward if you were to try and work with this scene. You know, you want these empty points up, these basically where the actual physical floor in your video, you know, the road, you want that to be on the grid floor right here. So there is a very, very easy way that you can do that using the movie clip editor. And that is, I should have told you this before, there's actually different modes, okay? So there's the main tracking one right there, and then there is the deconstruction mode. Where the deconstruction mode is, reconstruction mode, that is a mode that you use right at the end after you finish tracking. That's when you can start to set up the scene. I actually haven't used distortion mode yet. I think... Okay, there's not really much there. Anyway, we won't use distortion. We're just going to have a look at reconstruction. So the way this works is you can see you've got here orientation. So there's a button there that says set floor. So what it needs is 3 tracking points that you want to make the floor. So I'm going to select this point here, that point there, and then that point there. So that's where I want the actual floor of my scene to be. Once I've got that, I'm going to go ahead and click on set floor. And you'll see that now those tracking points have all been placed directly on the grid floor, and that is just beautiful. Absolutely perfect to work with, because now you can go ahead and add objects, and it's just going to work out really, really nicely. And also, if you've got, you know, the scene kind of off to the side and you want it to be positioned more in the center, so let's say I want the middle of this hole, I want that to be the actual center of my scene, I can go ahead, select that tracking point, and then click set origin. And now all those tracking points have been shifted, and it's looking good. You've also got these set axes as well. So if you wanted to change sort of what position they're on, you can click set X or set Y. If you know the orientation is a bit mixed up. Anyway, those are just some things that that you can play with. Oh, the other one that you might want to play with as well is the set scale. So if you wanted to set, say, these 2 tracking points here, you can say the distance between those 2 is 5 meters, even though it's not, it's probably 2 meters. So go ahead, you can just, you know, there's some stuff that you can play with here. I'm just kind of just showing it to you, how it all works and whatever else. That's pretty straightforward. So it's looking really good right now, because now you can see it's very easy for us to kind of, you know, just start adding stuff. But there's one more cool thing, okay? You've got the set up tracking scene button. So go ahead and click that. Okay, so now you can see you've got a plane and a cube. Probably thinking, Andrew, that's pretty useless. I don't want a plane and a cube in my scene. But what it has also done, apart from just adding those 2 objects, is it has gone in and added 2 render layers for you, the foreground and the background. It's set up the Z and the, this one's got vector, shadow, and AO enabled. And if you switch over to the compositor, you can see that it has added in all of these nodes for you. Now, you might not know what these nodes do just yet. Don't worry about it too much. But it essentially, it's made it so that it's given you a ground floor, which has calculated the shadows, the ambient occlusion, which you can then, you know, place any object on top of, and you're going to have shadows. You know, it's probably easier if I just show you. So let's just jump over here. Just moving that out the way. Okay, so just having a look at the scene here. I'm just going to go ahead and move this cube up so that it's sitting on that plane right there. And I'm going to go ahead and give that a render. And you can see, oh, I don't have a light in my scene. Oh, wait, yes I do. Okay, that's very bizarre. Let's position that a bit up there. Give that a quick render. Okay, so there's something going on. Oh, okay, so mine is both set to background. I thought yours should automatically work. I actually made a mistake in the recording, so I had to go back, so I think it screwed it up. But anyway, that should automatically be set up. So you should just be able to, if you click on set up tracking scene, it will automatically set up your scene so that now you have a ground floor, which you can which is going to be able to receive shadows and ambient occlusion. And then you've got objects, which you can then position any object on top of, and it's going to automatically calculate shadows and the stuff and cast it onto this plane here. Because if you didn't do that, it would be very difficult, because you've got a plane which is sitting over the top of a video plate, and you then have to try and work out the materials and stuff like that. So by doing that, clicking setup tracking scene is done all of that for you, all that hard work. So you've got just the one with the background, you've got the one with the foreground. So yeah, so essentially what this means is you can delete this cube and then add anything on that first layer right there, and a robot or whatever you want, and it's just going to look seamless with the rest of the scene. So yeah, so that's it. That is the camera tracking done and dusted. So if you wanted to follow this tutorial just up to this point till you've got some nice looking tracking, that's it. That's where we're up to. So go ahead and play with that all you want. If you want to work out how I created that sinkhole video, then continue on, because that's what I'm going to show you right now. So the sinkhole. Okay, so the way this is done, the way I created the sinkhole effect, was I used this plane here to blot out sort of a portion of the scene, and then I cut a hole in the center of it and then made a cylinder type tube thing, which then creates the illusion of a hole, because the cylinder, the rest of the cylinder is hidden underneath this plane, and then through the hole you can see the rest of the cylinder. So anyway, that's just a basis for it. So we can go ahead and delete this cube here. And also, if you want to remove the tracking points at any time, you can just go here underneath display and just turn off motion tracking, because it can sometimes be annoying if you're accidentally selecting the tracking points. So anyway, all right, so first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and add in a circle. So I'm just going to piece together the whole. I'm going to give it 200 vertices. And looking at it from the view of the camera, let's just do that. I want to make it roughly that size right there. I'm just going to scale it outwards and upwards, make it kind of an oval looking shape like that. Okay, that is not bad. Alright, and I want to create that nice crackling looking edge, okay, because I don't want it to look like a perfectly smooth hole, because that would be ridiculous. So I'm going to hit O, which is going to turn on this proportional fall off editing thing. I'm going to set that to random, and I'm just going to select this endpoint over here. Oh, actually no, sorry, I'm going to set that to sharp. I'm just going to create a few nice little sharp points here, maybe one here. I'm just trying to give it kind of a randomized looking shape. I'll change it to smooth now as well. Okay, and then the best one is setting it to random fall off. If you just click a bunch of random points like this, then scale it inwards, you can see you can kind of create a very quick, rough, rippled looking edge, just like that. So that's just a really quick and dirty way to just create a crackled looking effect. I made a tutorial on that already, and how to create a crack, how to model a crack in under 2 minutes. You can check that out if you want. Anyway, so that's a little hole there. So then I'm just going to go back into edit mode, and I'm going to extrude this back out. Whoops, turn off proportional editing, and I'm just going to extrude that outwards like that. Okay, and making sure that that is moved to the same layer as the plane, as you can see it is. Then I can go ahead and delete that plane. Okay, so now I've just got this nice big hole in the ground. Now I'm going to create a cylinder like this, drop this in right here. I'm going to uncheck cap ends, and I'm going to scale that up till it's roughly about just a little bit smaller than the size of the hole. You don't want it to poke out of the hole, like be visible from in the hole, if you know what I mean. So you just want to create the walls of the hole. I hope this is making sense. Just like that. It's cool, and I'll just move that down slightly. And I'm just going to set this to smooth shading. So you can see the kind of effect that we're having here. Now, if we've done this correctly now, provided that the hole, the actual hole itself, the cylinder, is on layer 1, and then this sort of ground plate here is on that layer. So this is the foreground, this is the background. Kind of hard to, you know, relate to that because this is really a hole in the ground, and, you know, how is that the background when it's the foreground? Anyway, don't worry really too much about the terminology, but we should now have this effect right here. Pretty straightforward. That's essentially how it is done. Now, I'll show you because I know you may want to know just a little bit more on how I achieved the rest of the effects. So I'm going to show you how I textured the inside of this, and then we're also going to add some cracks to the surface here as well. So again, I mean, if you only came for the camera tracking, we're really just you know, freeballing it at this point, just mucking around, adding in a few extra details, having a little bit more fun with it. So we'll do the inside of this hole here first. So I'm going to go ahead, give it a material, no specularity at all, and the texture that I'm going to use, oh, actually, first of all, I'm going to UV unwrap it because we can, because it's a hole in the ground. I'm just going to add a seam right here where it's obviously not going to be visible to the camera. So I'm just going to hit Control E, then select Mark Seam, UV Image Editor. I'm just going to very quickly unwrap this, hit U, unwrap, and then I'll just scale that up like that. Yep, that's good. Very quickly UV unwrapped. Then I'm going to go ahead and use a texture which is actually from the Nature Academy. Not that one. Let's use the ground textures. So I've got a bunch of seamless textures here. I'm going to make it available to you guys if you want to check it out. It is the red rock texture. This one we're going to use, so you can go ahead and download that. It's a little freebie for you. We're going to use UV mapping coordinates because we've just UV unwrapped it. I'm going to set the X and the Y. I'll set them, no, we'll leave them, I think I'll set them to 2 and 4. I think that's what I did before. Just trying to guess at exactly what it was that I did. I think that should be fine. Let's give that a quick render with that ground texture. That's not bad. It's okay. It's better than before at least. Now for the lamp, because we should probably work out the lamp whilst we're here, I'm going to make this an area lamp. I'm going to set the size of it so that it covers the size of the hole, just roughly like that. That's pretty good. Turn the distance down to, let's say, about 10, and I'll give that a quick render now, see how that looks. Yeah, it's not too bad. I'm going to turn up these samples. You want to make sure that, you know, your lighting for your scene best matches the actual lighting for the physical scene. So you can see that it's an overcast day, so you don't want to have harsh shadows like was there before. So turning the samples up to 4, it's got softer looking shadows, which of course blends in a lot more nicely with the rest of the scene. Now, originally what I did for my final scene was I did some work with texture nodes in order to blend another rock texture in there so you could get kind of like a layer effect happening. But when we get into that, it kind of gets a little bit too advanced, and it's not really for this tutorial. So if you want to check out the final.blend and see how I created the exact texturing for this this hole here, you can go ahead and do that, but we're just going to keep it pretty basic. So I'm just going to leave it as this, you know, basic looking dirt looking texture here, and what I'm going to do is just quickly add in another texture here, another gradient, and this is just going to fake some ambient occlusion, or really just making it so that we're faking a shadow from the inside of the hole here, because currently it looks like the hole is very well lit, and in order to fake its depth, I'm just going to quickly drop in a blend texture here. So just set that color there to dark. I'll set the mapping to UV, and then I'll set the blend to vertical, and then let's flip that around. And now if I give this a render, you should see it's a little bit darker towards the bottom of the hole, and you can increase that up even further. Actually, it should be a little bit more than that. What's happening? Let's turn the color, blend, mapping. Let's increase that even higher perhaps. Okay, there you go. You can see it's kind of coming into there. So that's how you fake the look of the hole looking quite deep. Very cheap, very nasty, but it does the job. So that's what we're going to keep it as. So that's fine. Let me just set this back to the way it was before. I did a little bit of work whilst I paused the recording, and that one was unchecked. Anyway, back to where it was. So that's the hole is looking quite good at the moment. Now getting on to the final thing, and that is to add the cracks around the outside, because I know that some of you are probably wondering that in the video. It's one of the little touches I added to try and make it look a little bit more realistic. So to do that, it's actually really quite simple. I'm just going to take this ground plane right here. I'm going to go to the UV image editor. Just go like this, and I'm going to UV unwrap it, or just go project from view, just like that. And actually what I did was I went to UV, then I went export UV layout, and then I took the UV layout into Photoshop, and I created this picture that you can see right here, which is really just a bunch of cracks, which I got off CG textures, and then I used the liquefy tool in Photoshop to kind of bend them around the shape of the hole. Now again, that's getting a little bit too advanced for this tutorial, so that would take too long, I think, to include it in here. It's pretty basic. You guys can figure out what to do. It just takes a little bit of time, just bending it, warping it to the shape of the hole. So I'm just going to go ahead and just use this, my pre-made texture that I've created here. I'm just going to use this in the scene. So I'm going to go to Image, Open Image, and let's go with Cracks Texture 8. Just going to load this in right here. Let's go Project from View again, and you can see it's got kind of like this pixelated effect there. And there's no option here to click pre-multiply. So what you have to do actually, if you want to get rid of that effect, just give it a material right now, then go to Textures, Image, and then select from the drop-down list that cracks right there, then click pre-multiply, and then it updates it here in the UV image editor. It's kind of annoying, but that's just one of those things you have to do. So I'm going to hit Project from View, and then you want to make it so that it's at the center. It's kind of hard to see because you've got the vertices and stuff already there. It's kind of a little bit tricky. I'm sure you get the idea. It's just increasing it a little bit by more. Yeah, just like that. I mean, I think that should be pretty much fine. So then I'm just going to go here, click on UV, make sure that it's mapped for UV, just like that. And then going back to our main material here, I'm going to go ahead and check shadeless, just like that. And now if I have a look at the background as I give it a render, what we should see is that right there. Just as it was rendering, you can kind of see you've got the cracks there appearing, and it's looking quite nice. The cracks are actually appearing on the wrong side though, so I'm just going to go back to the UV image editor, and I'm just going to flip it around. I'm just going to rotate that by 180 degrees so that the cracks are on the right side, so they're at the front. There we go, just like that. I'm then going to take the background, turn off sky, so it's not rendering the sky at all. I'm going to go to the compositor, and let's just give it another quick render now. And I'm going to take all of this shadow, ambient occlusion, all that stuff, because I don't need that, because there's actually nothing on top. Like there's no shadow that needs to be cast onto the ground itself. I'm going to go ahead and just delete that. I'm going to add a mix node in right here. Or am I going to add an alpha? No, yeah, hang on. Yeah, mix node. Just connect that up to the image. I'll set that to add. Let's just see how that looks. Yeah, that looks great. I'm just going to quickly change the diffuse color for that material all the way to white. I essentially just want a solid white looking texture like that. And then I'm just going to drop that in there into the multiply node. And you can see you now have cracks over the hole. Pretty simple indeed. I'll just turn that all the way up to 1 so you can see that. And if we tweaked it even further, it's not properly UV mapped at the moment. It's kind of a little bit off. So if you just, let's just bring back that texture there. Oh, I can see it's kind of moved it around for us. How nice. It's not what I wanted at all. Okay, that's good. Let's try that now. So there you go, now you've got cracks around the hole. So there is one final thing that we'll do, and that is to just add some thickness to the actual road itself, because if you have a look at the finished render, the road is very, very paper thin looking. So of course we want to fix that. So I'm just going to grab this edge right here. I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate it. Then I'm going to hit P to make it a separate object. I'm then going to grab that separate object, move it to the foreground layer, so the same layer that the hole is on. I'm then just going to grab it, extrude it downwards, As you can see, super duper easy. Some people said that the road in my final animation was too thin, which I think I actually agree with. So I'm just making it a little bit thicker there. Just like that. And for the material, I'll give it a new material. I'll just make this a very... Oh, that's the specularity. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'll just make it, yeah, something like that, I think. Let's just give it a quick render now. Let's see how it looks with the rest of it. I think it's too dark. Let's just brighten it up just slightly. Almost there. Coming up to the final stretch. Oh, and that's probably a little bit too much. And I'll just recalculate the doubles because I can see there was just something a little bit wrong with that. You can also, if you wanted to, you could add a little bit of randomness to the edge of that as well. Just I'm just grabbing just the bottom row there. So if you didn't know what I just did then, just select that top row like that, hit H to hide it, and then I'm just going to select some of these random ones right here, and then just do just like I did before using the random fall off. Just scale them in a little bit. That just adds a little bit more randomness to the edge as well. Let's give that another render right now, and we should see it sort of coming together now as one. Yeah, that's let me just bring back the other one. I think it's probably a little bit too thick now, so. And I think it's a little bit too bright as well. So these things take a little bit of tweaking to get right, but that's pretty much it, guys. That is roughly the tutorial in a nutshell. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and render out this animation. So just go to the output, just select a folder there somewhere on your hard drive, render out the frames, and then we'll check out what it looks like when it is finished. Okay, so it's just finished rendering out the 210th frame of the animation. So I'm just going to quickly now jump over to the video editor, and I'm going to go ahead and add in all of the frames that it's just rendered. I'm going to drop this in right here. Let's go full frame and hit Alt A, and there you go. So you can see our hole is staying perfectly stuck into the video. The tracking is looking brilliant. You can see that it's worked successfully, and the hole looks believable. So that completes this tutorial, guys. I hope you learned a couple of things from it, and as always, I'm really interested in seeing what you create with it. So if you make something awesome, upload it on YouTube. Make sure you give it the correct title, like Blender camera tracking or something like that, so other people can find it. And then go ahead, post it in the comments below, show off what you've done, and I'm really looking forward to seeing some of the cool and creative stuff that you guys come up with. So that concludes the tutorial. Thanks very much for watching.